every stage of the war, the Ukrainians have been able to surprise, especially given the assumptions that we all made about Russia's military strength and how effectively they would be able to operate. I mean, even the battle at Hostomel, that was an early surprise to see so many Russian helicopters shot down and the Russians not be able to get out of Hostomel. The battle to protect Kiev when there was this, remember watching this huge 34-mile tank column with all of the kind of support vehicles behind it and thinking, God, it looks very formidable, but also why is it out in the open like that? And obviously the Ukrainians made short work of it.
But Yuri, from a Ukrainian perspective, the Ukrainian government, had the Ukrainian government overestimated Russia's capability or underestimated it? What were the preparations that had gone on that you saw beforehand from a military perspective and a political perspective to try and maintain the Ukrainian state?
In a way, Phil, I think everybody underestimated, including Ukrainian government, everybody underestimated Ukrainian people. I mean, I personally remember how in the first hours of the large-scale invasion, we'd call each other friends, and we would just ask each other, so is it for us going to be a fight or flight reaction? Because nobody knew. Because like you, we also knew that Russia is a major, huge superpower with infinite artillery, fighter jets, and all other means of warfare. So, of course, we felt intimidated, and the Ukrainian people has surprised everybody, and I think that was a determining factor. But I would like to quickly go back to the point you made earlier as to why Russians failed and why they were overconfident. This large-scale invasion was preceded by years of hybrid warfare, and Russians were buying up TV networks in Ukraine through their proxies in our government, in our parliament, through their stooges in the Ukrainian special services, so essentially they were confident that there will be no resistance from the Ukrainian people, because they thought that by that time the Ukrainian people were so brainwashed into believing that we are the same people, we have shared history, shared culture, and so they thought that people would greet Russian tanks with flowers, and after 3 or 7 days this will be over. But Ukrainian people by then had a very good sense of our own identity, and we knew very well what Russia was like. We knew that it's a tyranny. We knew that it's a country with no democracy, no freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and that's why even cities like Kharkiv, which is used to be 100% Russian-speaking city, 20 kilometers from the border with Russia, even they, met the occupants, the aggressors, with resistance. So I think that was the first sign that Russians will fail, because the Ukrainian people will chose the fight option and they put up a fight.
Now, getting on and moving on a little bit, because the initial stages were fascinating, but we're 4 years into this war now. Over the past 4 years, what particular things have stuck in your mind, with regards to this horrific conflict? Maxim, you've been reporting on this for a long time. What's stuck in your mind and why?
Well, I think that every stage of the war, the Ukrainians have been able to surprise, especially given the assumptions that we all made about Russia's military strength and how effectively they would be able to operate. I mean, even the battle at Hostomel, that was an early surprise to see so many Russian helicopters shot down and the Russians not be able to get out of Hostomel. The battle to protect Kiev when there was this, remember watching this huge 34-mile tank column with all of the kind of support vehicles behind it and thinking, God, it looks very formidable, but also why is it out in the open like that? And obviously the Ukrainians made short work of it. I think recently it's been more and more surprising when the Russians have launched new offensives that they haven't been able to make much ground. I remember being in Kharkiv during the second attempted offensive in the Kharkiv region when they entered Vovchansk. And then after all this fighting, so it's 2 years since that offensive nearly, and they've only just taken Vovchansk, which is a town 10 miles away from the Russian border. The really incremental pace of the Russian offensive, but then also the kind of lightning fast Ukrainian counteroffensive we've seen, impressive, especially in the Kharkiv region where they had the big counteroffensive, is impressive in Kherson, and then again in Kursk. I mean, it hasn't worked out. I think that one of the downsides of these offensive operations is that maybe the Ukrainians then stay too long or cling on too long, and they did that in Kursk. But the ability of Ukraine to still, when you think that it's kind of just on the defensive mode and it's really struggling and it's struggling for manpower, still able to mount these surprise counteroffensives, and that's been impressive.
And Ben, from a military perspective, yes, the Ukrainians have been impressive. They have shown on occasions that they've wrestled the initiative back and they've controlled the narrative. With as Maxim said, Kherson, Kharkiv, and in the Kursk region. Do you think this is a marker of the successes that Ukraine has had over the past 4 years, and do you think this is something they'll be able to take into the future?
What we have seen from this war are reminders of so many things from military history and military theory that we studied in staff college or heard about, about logistics, about the moral or the willpower, where smaller size forces have defeated much larger, better equipped forces, commanders, leaders being at the right place, small unit leaders taking initiative, on and on and on. And the side which is able to adapt the fastest often will be successful. All of these things have played out. And if it had not been for the failure of the United States, UK, Germany, and other nations to immediately provide everything that Ukraine needed, and also to declare that it was our strategic objective for Ukraine to defeat Russia, then this war would have ended 2 years ago, probably. One of the most important things for any political leader to do is clearly identify the strategic aim. And President Biden, who did a lot to make sure to bring together allies to support Ukraine, never could get past, we're with you for as long as it takes. And I think if they had not been so preoccupied with the possibility of Russia using a nuclear weapon somewhere, and if they had not been hindered by too many people think, oh my God, Russia's so big, we got to be careful and all that, then this thing, today we would be celebrating the second anniversary of the victory in Ukraine Day. And I think that that part's frustrating. And yet, despite that, the ability of Ukraine to stop Russia where they are is a testimony to what was provided. I mean, I remember that video in the opening weeks of the British provided in-law anti-tank systems obliterating Russian tanks that were coming through this town. It was unbelievable. So I know I'm kind of bouncing around here, but the frustration is that even with the lack of adequate support that we provided, Ukraine has stopped Russia. If we in the West had committed to helping Ukraine actually use the D word, defeat Russia, this would have been over at least 2 years ago. And instead, we kept them on life support, drips and drips. And I think we're going to look back on that for a long time as a missed opportunity, but also a failure.
But, what you say we should give them everything that they want. Should we have helped them define what they want? Because if we had taken every weapon system that we had in the West and threw it at Ukraine, the chances are they'd have lost many Western weapon systems. If we're giving them F-16s on day one, their pilots might have been able to take the aircraft off from the ground. I might have been able to land it again, but they certainly wouldn't be able to fight it because it takes a long time, even for a trained Western pilot to convert to an aircraft, to learn how to use the weapon systems, to fight the airframe. And therefore, the political danger of us losing lots of Western equipment was something that was playing in the minds of our leaders. And we would have had to been smart in putting the weapons in that Ukraine could have picked up and started to use effectively very, very quickly. No, we didn't do that. But do you think that was part of the reason why people were scared that they'd overwhelm the Ukrainians?
Let me take your challenge. First of all, my point is committing to helping Ukraine win. And then you work with them to say, okay, what do you need? What capabilities? I generally try to stay away from naming specific weapons because there might be 4 or 5 different platforms that could deliver the capability. But people got hung up on HIMARS or F-16 or Abrams or whatever. What capability would be needed? And I would also say that it was quite annoying when I would hear reports that the Pentagon or maybe somewhere in British MOD or Germany would say, well, the Ukrainians, they don't know how to do all this stuff. And so our own arrogance is the only way to say it. The Ukrainians know the Russians better than we ever will. They know their own terrain better than we ever will. And they're the ones fighting for their survival. And I think that I'm not saying just push stuff to them, whatever we can find in the back of the bunker, but make that commitment. And that commitment would also mean not waiting until year 2 to start training F-16 pilots, but instead immediately doing that, because it will take months to do that. And finally, I would say we have consistently underestimated the ability of Ukrainians to adapt, to learn how to use new things. And I don't think it was a calculated, well, we don't want to give them too much because they might lose it. I mean, that's how he treated me when I was a teenager. Be careful what he let me do as a teenager. But I think with the Ukrainians, I think commit, and that means also all the economic tools, supporting with financial resources, stopping these goddamn Russian Shadow Fleet vessels, all of this stuff, comprehensive. I'm sorry, this is a family program, but what I'm saying.
Thank you for watching Frontline. Now, in case you haven't heard, we've got our own channel now, so please subscribe whenever subscriptions start again. But of course, you can still listen to us if you want to on Times Radio at 01:35 hours in the morning Greenwich Mean Time, but that is 20:35 Eastern Standard Time for those in the United States. And of course, please put your comments in and share our link with your friends. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.